So good morning to all. Yeah. Over to the our moderator for today, Rajsekhar Jaswami.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I have close to 2 decades of experience in IT. I've worked in numerous roles, and prior to being part of this community, I've learned a lot of things as I've learned, and I've also tried to share it with the community. Right. So my interests include product management and business agility journeys, right? And this topic that we have chosen, evolving the business models during the pandemic, is about how organizations have displayed business agility and how they have gone through the process of trying to not just overcome the impact of the pandemic, but also come out stronger, right? So everything that has gone into evolving the business models is something that we're going to discuss today. Now, we have the first panel member is Kapil Jaiswal. Kapil is a product leader at WhatFix. Kapil is an IIMC graduate, IIMC MBA graduate, and he has run his own startups and been associated with multiple large organizations in their product management practice. Welcome, Kapil. The next member that we have on the panel is Kishore. Kishore is a graduate from Indian School of Business on business technology management. Now he has worked in Singapore for quite a few years. Currently, he is leading some large programs at a large corporate here in Bangalore. Welcome, Kishore. Our next member is Rahul Mohandas, who is an avid cyclist. He's also the founder and co-founder of Via Product. This is a startup which is actually helping out startups build on their product management foundations. Welcome, Rahul. Next we have Rebecca. Rebecca leads the business excellence practice at Epsilon Epsilon Technologies. She has a long career with multiple companies, including Wipro, and being part of Wipro, she has served multiple Fortune 500 companies. Welcome, Rebecca. Next, we have Suresh, who's a product design leader with multiple years of experience. He has worked in multiple Fortune 500 companies, in fact, Fortune 50 companies, and helped them with their design and user experience. So we have a diverse panel. This diverse panel not just brings their expertise in their areas, but they're also going to talk about what they and their groups did during the lockdown periods as the world went into lockdown and tried to come out of lockdowns, what has gone into evolving the business models at their respective organizations and what they have seen, right? So welcome everyone. Before we start, right, we need to have a common understanding of business models. We have a diverse set of audience, and therefore with this diverse set, I think creating a baseline on which we discuss is something that's important. Let's get started and understand what a business model actually is, right? Business model is all about the way in which businesses generate income, right? Now, generating income comes by actually creating value. And then once value gets created, it's all about delivering the value to the customer and then creating value for the organization itself, right? So there are three aspects of business model. One, which is about creating value. Value gets created when you eliminate a pain that a customer or a customer segment is facing, or you create a gain for a customer, right? So the value gets created in either of the two ways. Once a value gets created, it actually has to be delivered in form of a product or a service to our customers. Once it gets delivered, it's also about collecting revenue from the customer so that the company can continue to grow and thrive, right? So this is what business model is all about. Now, Alex Osterwalder, who's an author, speaker, consultant, and entrepreneur, known for his work on business models, created something called the business model canvas. Now, this business model canvas talks about various elements that form a business model, right? Everything starts with customer and the value proposition at the center, right? So value proposition, as I said, it could be any a pain eliminator or a gain creator that is very specific to a customer. Now, for a customer, what are the delivery channels, distribution channels that you use to deliver your product or service? What customer relationships would you be building to deliver that? What key resources would you need? What kind of activities would you perform to create value? Who will you partner with to actually create that value? And then at the end, everything boils down to the costs that are involved in creating that value and the revenue streams that you create to get the revenue back to the organization so that the organization can flourish and grow and flourish. So that's what business model is all about, right? Now, business model canvas is something that was popularized by Alex Osterwalder. Now, this business model canvas involves these 9 elements. Now, evolving the business model may involve changing or tweaking one or more of these elements, right? Today, with our panel, we are going to discuss how they have been involved, right? How they have been involved, how their groups have been involved in tweaking different aspects of the business model as the world went into a lockdown, as the customer behaviors evolved, and based on what they saw and what they learned, how they went about trying to evolve the business model. So this is what I would like to share before we get started. Now, here's an example of what a business model canvas for a company like Uber looks like, right? This probably is overly simplified, but then it does capture some essence of what their business model is about, right? This is, for example, so that our audience coming from diverse fields is able to understand what a business model canvas is about, and this will help them appreciate the conversation that we're going to have today. Now, often we notice that business models are something that the word business model, business strategy is often interchangeably used. We've often seen that people use this as a buzzword in every conversation, but few understand what it actually means, right? So, differentiating business model from business strategy. Business strategy is all about trying to figure out how an organization intends to do better than its competition, right? And that's where they strategize on what they could do differently so that they retain their competitive advantage. Business models, the approach at a high level could potentially be same for one or more companies, but the strategy actually defines how an organization performs and how it delivers on that business model. Today, with our panelists, we are going to discuss how they have seen and helped evolve various aspects of the business model during the COVID-19 pandemic. Right. Let's get started with the conversation. Right. So I would start this conversation with probably Rahul first. Rahul, you are running a startup. You are a startup yourself, and you are helping other startups and consulting to them about helping them build their product management practice. Right. So, what did you see, and what was your level of preparation uh, as the world moved into lockdowns? What did you see?
Um, Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Raj, for having me here as part of the panel. So before I answer that question, maybe I'll give a bit of context as to what I was doing at that stage, and then get into things. So since April of 2019, I was working as an independent consultant, and I was working with two startups in Bangalore, and one of them was a seed stage startup in the astrology domain, and the other was a growth stage company in the ed tech space. We'll focus on the edtech side of the my client, because I think that's more relevant here in this context. So they had actually, so they'd been around for about 5 6 years. They found their product market fit, and they were kind of growing, and they raised some level of funding from private investors. and their money was coming in on a month-on-month basis. It was not like they're given like $1 million, yeah, go do whatever you want. It was sort of private investors who are giving in money on a month-on-month basis. So that's one part of what I was doing. The other part of what I was doing was I was also working on a couple of prospects to try and grow my consulting practice, right? Try and get I was working as an independent consultant, but I was talking to a couple of clients to see how there could be work that I could pick up for them. So that's what I was doing at that time. And so when the lockdown started and the pandemic hit and the lockdown started, a couple of things happened, right? So one is there were the 2-3 prospects that I was working with. They all went cold. I mean, nothing. You don't hear back from them, right? So that's one thing that happened, and that kind of puts you into shock. Oh my God, what's going to happen, right? So that's one side. The second aspect was that this edtech company, the investors actually started going a bit cold again. So the cash flow that they were getting sort of slowed down, right? And that puts pressure on that organization. The third aspect there was that so they were getting a lot of clients, a lot of interest, because all these schools and colleges wanted to try and go online, and this platform that they were offering would help that. So there was a lot of interest in the market, but all the clients were also sort of renegotiating payment terms, because they were also uncertain, right? So that again puts cash flow pressures on the organization. So that's on the cash flow side of things. That's what we were seeing. The other aspect, we will touch upon the operational impact that we had at that edtech company, right? So in the past, I'd worked with a large organization, and the past 10 years, I'd worked with a multinational company with multiple locations and so on. So corporate laptops was a given, tools to work remotely and collaborate was a given. So people, I mean, I just used to take that for granted, right? And but in this organization, uh, which is running a tight ship, all the developers used to work with desktops, right? And they did not have a concept of work from home. Now, I used to work with them remotely, because that's the way I sort of set it up. But the organization did not have the capability to work remotely at that time, right? When the pandemic hit, and I mean, you can't just buy laptops and set up everything overnight, right? So I mean, I was actually quite surprised. So all the developers, and this actually probably gives away my age. So I bought a personal laptop probably when I was 35 or more, years old, right? But all the developers had their personal laptops, and they all started working from home using their personal laptops. And I guess these days, every engineering graduate has their own personal laptop, right? So they started working with their personal laptops, and within about 2 weeks they figured out what tools to use, be it Slack or Zoom or Google Meet, or they all set up VNCs to access their desktops in office. And within about 2 weeks the team was fully operational, working remotely with whatever they could garner. And I think that's a testimony to their resilience and commitment, right? Because our sprint velocity did not drop, right? After the 2 week period, there was a bit of a drop during the 2 week period, but then it picked up, and it just continued to deliver. I think that's a testimony to their like you're saying, commitment and resilience. Now, but going back to your original question, how prepared were we? No, we were not. I was not prepared at all. And the uncertainty at that time was scary, right? You didn't know for how long this lockdown was going to go on. You did not know when it would open up and how it would open up. You did not know what impact it would have on the economy overall. It was just, you're looking at uncertainty, and it was just taking one day at a time and trying to live through that day and make the best of that day. Uh, that was just it at that time. I don't know if that answers, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So you did touch upon personal agility, and this personal agility actually rubbing off to the entire team. Team coming together, I think, in 2 weeks, getting back and defining a normal that they would work with or try to work with. I think definitely is something that I think most of us went through that journey and trying to figure out how do we work and how do we work remotely, right? Great. So we've heard from a startup or from a seed funding kind of startups. Kapil, you come from a well-funded startup, reasonably well-funded. You've been in business. Your WhatFix has been in business for close to 7 years now. What did you see getting into the lockdown starting March?
Yeah, thanks, Raj, for inviting me to this event, giving me an opportunity to talk about my company and how we have handled. Just a bit of context, I will set. WhatFix is a around 7-year-old B2B mid-sized startup, and we are currently in the growth phase. We call ourselves a digital adoption platform, essentially helping businesses improve their performance by reducing technology complexity both for their customers as well as their employees. Now, our customers base cut across all sorts of industries and across the globe. That is one fact about how our customer base is, and our offering is in a SaaS model. So that is a bit of context of how we operate. Now, coming to what we have observed as we all went into pandemic. So I'll totally resonate with whatever Rahul talked about, the amount of uncertainty we had as we went into there. So I had read about the Spanish flu, which is almost like 100 years back, which had hit, and how much the impact was. But it was like you are reading something and don't really understand when it happens actually to you. Now, during January, February, when COVID-19 was just a news, which is happening in a distant country, and the realization, didn't really set in. It was like, okay, something is happening in maybe China and maybe in Italy when the news started coming. But then slowly, because of our very diverse customer base across the globe, and many of our customer success, sales, product folks are most of the time traveling and meeting customers, prospects. We started hearing back from our prospects and customers that, okay, let's not meet face to face. Let's do a online call only. That was the first, instances where we realized that, okay, there is some change happening. There was like early Feb, mid Feb, when we started hearing from US and some parts of Europe. By late Feb, I think this realization had set in that the gravity of situation is really bad. We immediately called back all our employees. That was the first thing we did. All of you come back to the base. No more traveling. Everything will be doing it online only. That was the first change that we saw. That some change that our company had got impacted because of this current pandemic. Now, employees' safety was primary concern for us. So just not moving them back. Then also we started preparing that, okay, now by March, I think we can expect this to also hit our India much more strongly than it was at this point in time. So we started preparing of how do we go totally work from home, total remote, even though most of our folks were with laptops, as Rahul only said, most of our developers were on desktop mode, but they also had a laptop, but still our entire infra was not 100% of working, everybody working from home. So quickly in 2 weeks, our IT stretched and we had some dry runs and to make sure that everybody can go full remote. And I clearly remember by third week of March is when the entire company went work from home. And from that date till now, we are still working from home. And I think just resonate with what Rahul said, resilience of our folks, totally commitment to the company and making sure that our growth doesn't impact it. I have not seen any productivity dip. Somehow we have been able to cope up with this entire scenario.
Great. So next question to you, Rebecca. You work on the business excellence side, right? So getting into the lockdown, what were you seeing? What did you hear from your leaders as to what were their priorities? And
first of all, thank you for having me, and very good morning to all of you who are here. Thank you for making it here to listen to all of us. And listening to Rahul and Kapil, I can also reflect the same sentiment that ran in the office. We didn't believe it was happening. For a very long time, a lot of our colleagues that were talking to us from different parts of the world, in Epsilon, we are a global organization spanning across US and India primarily, but also with a presence in APAC and Europe. And we were coming off an acquisition last year. We had just completed an integration with Publicis Group, which is a large advertising agency that bought us over. We sell marketing technology solutions to all kinds of big brands, with 60% of our business being in North America. So our goals were organic growth for this year, given that we had just made this transition. And come March, the Q1 earnings call happened and suddenly focus changed. The first thing that really struck me was the fact that suddenly people became on the top of our goals. That everything that we spoke of was how do we take care of the health and wellness of our employees and our people? How do we bring people back home? Because as a company, we've always been, very ready to travel. Everyone's in person. You meet your business leaders in person. Discussions on initiatives that we drive, especially in my role, used to happen face to face very often. And suddenly all of that went away. Everyone is remote. Everyone's trying to make sense of how do we work like this, because in India we had 2,500 people who worked out of two large hubs in Bangalore, and now everyone's gone off online and remote. And how do we get used to that new normal for all of us? Some of the things that really took precedence for us was resetting the communication structure. So as a business excellence team, we did rely many times on the meetings, the review meetings that we would have as a leadership group, and many times face to face here in India. All of that went away. I used to walk into people in the cafeteria and understand what's going on. I didn't have any of those sources of information. As a support team, a lot of your information comes from some of these informal gatherings. You meet someone at a town hall, you talk to them, you understand what's going on, you make your plans for what next you can support the leadership and the delivery teams with. All of that went away. So we had to rethink our entire strategy of how do we stay in touch and stay connected with different levels of the organization. Also, for us as a company, our focus was mostly on really large clients. And then, reflecting on what Rahul was saying, suddenly the large clients don't want to spend as much anymore. And our product solutions are selling in millions of dollars. No one wants to spend that kind of money in this environment. And the focus suddenly changed to service lines and service offerings that we used to overlay on our product solutions, which meant that we had to step up the game there, make sure that we had better standardization and better structure there to support the clients that were coming in at that level. Also, as a business, we started realigning our media plans so that we had a focus on short-term ROI, right? So, which meant we suddenly shifted focus from the really large possibilities to the smaller possibilities. And then we had to rethink our positioning to see how do we support those customers who are not looking to spend as much money as the large brands that the big brands that we worked with. So that also meant rethinking our delivery models, rethinking our governance structure, making things more lean, trying to think through how do we support teams to self-organize themselves, because we are now not sitting together or working in team settings. A lot of things that happened very easily through co-location just went away. So for me, that was the first part that really changed, thinking through how we handle all of that communication.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. And Kishore, my next question would be to you on what were you seeing on the program management side? So you have been leading large programs. What were you hearing? What were you seeing? How did your and your team's priorities actually evolve?
Thank you, Raj, for the question, and thank you all for joining. And it's a pleasure being there with all the panelists here. Just before I go ahead, the kind of limitation, right, when we work with quite large global organization, right? So whatever I represent here in this forum is purely my personal view and doesn't represent my employer or other organizations, right? All right. So coming back to the question, Raj, right? So what did we see? So I think just 2 weeks back, we are having a conversation with our partner, and we came up with we are trying to look around what has happened or how did we started facing this pandemic and what have been our changes. Right? So to put in short form, we literally talked about RRR, right? Of course, I'm not talking about the movie which Raj Mouli is making around, but this is more about the resilience of the companies, or the reaction of the company, I would say, as a first, and then the resilience of the companies or the projects what we do, and of course the recovery, what could happen in terms of the projects or programs which are executed. So when we actually started off, the very first reaction, as Rahul, Radhika, or Kapil have been saying, is that it's unprecedented, basically. Right? Nobody is prepared for it. And when we are talking about large global organizations, they are pretty cash rich, and they generally have this tendency of being not so flexible or not so nimble when it comes to shifting their priorities or in terms of supporting the employees, etc. But when this pandemic hit us, the very first thing was to identify what's the immediate need. Right? The immediate need, as most of us agree, is people, right? Because pandemic is something which hit people. So the people have to be taken care, and along with that care, in progression, we also need to ensure that business continuity goes on, and we also need to align with our strategic objectives, right? It can't that you can't pivot overnight just because you hit a pandemic, and these global organizations are pretty well established in their businesses. So the first thing we cared about is people, and the second thing is about the cost optimization on how and where we could do the optimization basically, and in turn enable that the continuity of the business is in progress.
Kind of what we are hearing is there are multiple organizations, different sizes, and having different kind of pressures. We've heard about a startup trying to figure out how to get laptops, mid-sized startup trying to figure out how do they get prepared, getting all people back, and for large organizations, the challenge of not being too flexible to actually pivot or do something different, right? So, really interesting thoughts. Now, my next question would be to Kapil. Kapil, now that we've heard about how prepared you were or how prepared the organization was in getting into the lockdown, but then now we want to like to know about how your priorities as a product leader started evolving since March.
Yeah, Raj. So I'll first talk a bit about the entire company strategy because we are only one product. So company strategy is not very different from product strategy. So when we entered 2020, we had a really aggressive growth plan, both in terms of top line as well as hiring across all the functions. And as we all mentioned and discussed, there was no set playbook of how to play in this pandemic. There was a lot of uncertainty. It wasn't like 2009 global meltdown when the impact was local to certain industries and just the rate of growth had slowed down. In this current scenario, almost many industries have almost just come to a halt. And among our customers also, we have who are especially in the hospitality and travel, we saw their business almost coming to zero. We were just measuring the engagement of our product, and we saw the people are not even logging in. Many customers or users have got furloughed. So we didn't want to actually think too much ahead as there was so much uncertainty, no playbook. We wanted to just play like a test cricket match, play session by session. We see how it goes and then kept revisiting our plans. Every 4 weeks is when we were revisiting our plans, and we were also very transparent to all our employees during this time because we didn't want to set any expectations or hope because we also were not very sure, and there was also certain amount of uncertainty among our employees also how it is going to impact us. So all these going on when we were trying to address the challenge, our first priority was from a product perspective and from a company perspective was to make sure that we retain our customers. That was the first priority. We can compromise on growth but made sure that our customer retention is almost as much as possible, the maximum extent. Our product priorities also reflected the same. We quickly pivoted to ensure that we addressed as much as problems or queries or requirements which were being asked by our customers. So addressing the request became the foremost priority. We deprioritized a lot of new capabilities we wanted to add, which was more on the innovation, more futuristic looking, so that we deprioritized for next 1 quarter. And but we all knew internally that this too shall pass. That is still we hope as the pandemic started unfolding. And the nature of our product was because of this pandemic, the digital transformation, we were all expecting it should get accelerated. And what fix we believe is going to play a part there. So we didn't want to really slow down on our R&D efforts, our development efforts. So during this phase, we kept on increasing our R&D strength also. So that is one function where we didn't want to stop. Other functions we were more observant of how the market is going to react, how customers are going to react, and then we will revisit our hiring plan. Those are some of the things from the product perspective I can talk about.
Great. So next question that I have is for Rahul. Rahul, you've been a startup and you're working with startups, right? So my question to you would be, did you face this dilemma of sustenance versus growth? Kapil touched a little bit about what he faced. Was there anything similar, or did you face this dilemma at all?
So, yeah, I mean, I think, see, what we were saying at my client's place, for example, was, they were, the adoption of the product actually had increased substantially because, there's a product that was offered to coaching centers, right, to take their business online. Now, when the pandemic hit, the adoption of the product actually went up manifold. And like what Kapil was referring to, we wanted to make sure that the customers actually had a good experience on the product, right? So there was a lot of investments being made in terms of making sure the infrastructure was strong, that it could handle the extra load, and whenever the issues were coming in, that was actually being addressed on a priority basis. um, so I think the focus at that time was more on sustenance, making sure that we're not building new things. We're just making sure everything that we have works well, because that was all being stress tested, so to speak, during this period because of the adoption of this thing. Um, yeah, so it was the focus at that time. In the early days of the pandemic, till at least till about June or so, was making sure systems are up and running. So it was more on sustenance rather than on growth. um, there were conversations going on with new customer segments, like because earlier the focus was on coaching centers, but right then we started talking to colleges, started talking to schools. Um, but the from a product perspective, the focus was very much on sustenance. All the engineering effort was going into making sure the products were being sustained and making sure the lights are on.
Okay, so you touched a very important point about trying to explore new customer segments. Uh, did anybody, maybe this is an open question to all panelists, did any of you try and figure out new segments, or did you help with identification of any new customer segments that your company or the products that you have can cater to during this lockdown?
I want to add to what Rahul was saying there. We had also seen a very interesting observation within the organization. So we have products that support email campaigns for marketing, and these sit on the strength of various data-based solutions that we have in place, and those platforms help us get great insight into what people are looking for. Immediately those turned into COVID information, and support mechanisms for our customers to reach their consumers, and especially with, like Kapil mentioned, the hospitality segment. A lot of our hospitality clients were suddenly stuck for having to really get any business in. But a lot of that communication that happened in that period of time was being done through our campaign software, which was originally marketing software, but was being used now for COVID information reaching people. The healthcare group of clients that we are supporting really capitalized on that, during that period of time. So that was a very interesting switchover of the same product being used in a very different way.
Interesting. Go ahead, Kapil.
Yeah, right. So just like an add-on to that point of we figuring out new use cases. So yes, our product was being used for in-app communication a lot, and that was mostly meant for improvement of application adoption, software adoption. But during this time, we saw a lot of communication started happening, informing about the COVID policies, COVID processes, well-being of our employees. We used our same product for our own employees also, to make sure that employees are taking a break. So we used to give a push engagement within the product. Let's after 1 hour, go and take a break for 15-20 minutes. Those are the things which we tried with our own product, new use cases we figured out for our customers as well as internally also.
So that's what they say, right? Eat your own dog food. So I think your teams started doing that during this pandemic. That's a great thing. Any insights that you generated by eating your own dog food?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of employee feedback that we got, that not in terms of the product, but the terms of sentiment that company really cares about them, making sure that their well-being is being taken care. So that was the sentiment part which we really got feedback on.
Great. That's really great. Anybody else who would like to add on this? Anything that you folks noticed? Um,
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe I can. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kishore.
yeah, no. So just adding to that, right? I'd just like to give a different vantage point to the conversation, right? So when it came to our pretty larger corporates over there in the world, uh, I would say the focus has majorly shifted around one, of course, definitely the people care and ensuring that our workforce is there. But the interesting fact which evolved during the pandemic is on the contracting as well, right? So pretty large corporates engage quite a few, I would say, rather good amount of strategic workforce or contingent workforce that doesn't really get onto the payrolls of it. So there were many changes or thoughts in terms of on how the contracting has to be in place, the flexible contracting, right? And of course, there are many changes, I would say, very aggressive changes when it came to HR policies as well. So especially remote working, etc. So I think pretty of us are familiar when there is a rule that companies are operated out of SEZ zones. Basically, they don't have a lot much flexibility to allow their employees to work from home on a constant basis, right? Just because of the government legality aspects involved. But when this pandemic came up, I think the quick turnaround of HR policies in addressing that issues, along with ensuring the proper infrastructure is available to most, if not all, employees, and also ensuring that they are properly trained on how to keep their health and mind active, right? In terms of ergonomics and how to take breaks and avoid burnouts. Encourage people to take kind of breaks or holidays, which they don't generally take because, especially in Indian context, people tend to uh, preserve their leaves towards some end wherein they want to attend a family event or a festive season, whatnot, right? So we literally went on talking to many such groups saying that, oh, guys, you guys you span your holidays, don't just club them towards the year end. You don't know what is going to happen. Just so that's the kind of change which is literally seen, and of course technology challenges came along the way. People used to, as Rebecca was mentioning, we used to have corridor charts, cafe charts. We used to transfer information and etc. But the remote collaboration is something which became a challenge as well in these days.
Great. That's great. So I see there is an audience question that has come up from Mahadevan. He's asking, what changes to the customer behavior did you see? And did you tweak your business model to address any new customer behaviors?
Thanks for having me this morning. Yes, there is a massive shift, right? I mean, the pandemic has basically dramatically changed people's life all across the globe. It's just not in India or any specific part of the world. And these in turn, the changes the customer, the way they use our products. There are a few, if any, industries that haven't been impacted in some way or other. We don't know. Everything is getting impacted in some way, right? So our users' preferences and behaviors have shifted largely, and in some cases they are very different now than they were in 2019 or pre-COVID. So there are major shifts in the market, though we don't know how long this COVID will last. It's clear that many businesses will need to adjust to a new reality in which millions of people are self-isolating at home. As long as the brick and mortar business remains closed, people will need and depend heavily on technology in order to meet their needs. Right now, coming back to little bit about business model canvas that we speaking about. We had this for a very, very long time. Some of them are using it, but as they say, we got to be adopting the pastel model while we are doing that. That's basically political, economical, social, or cultural, technological, environmental, and legal impacts that would have on your business. Those are not considered while you're doing this business model canvas or your strategies for launching products and maintaining them. So customers' behaviors per se have changed drastically, right? And what has taken precedent now is safety, security, in that aspect. And there are different changes in the customer thought process. There are behavioral changes, there are psychological shifts that are happening. Customers' expectations have changed, right? What was awesome yesterday is hygiene today, and they are looking at things delivered being faster or better than your competition. Because if you are a competitor and if you're not addressing the current needs, then somebody else will take the pie. And to understand how exactly people's daily lives and routines have changed depends on the individual, the job, the role they're doing, the current situation they're living in, the current location they're in. But considering some of the common shifts, which would be, I would say, the pre-COVID and the post-COVID era, um, we all know there are some large things that have happened. Like, for example, we're commuting to office, now we are working from home. We were exercising in a gym, now we try to do that home or our balconies or wherever. And so buying products in stores, now buying it online, and going to a movie theater, now you're renting a movie at home. So there is a major shift in what customers have been doing and how their behaviors have impacted in the last couple of months or nearly a year now. This behavior shift may be a short-term change or may have a massive long-term consequence to our industries. And now there are big inclinations towards e-commerce as well, right? And I mean, we don't have a strong e-commerce portal. You will need to build one out quickly. And if you have not done so far, then you're in trouble, right? As a result, we have seen a growth in demand of high quality performing UX design for applications as well. People are asking that, give us something which is fast, which is quick, easy to understand, and things like that. So there is increased concern for cyber security as well. With the increased dependence on technology, businesses and users are now increasingly concerned about security, right? And it is something that can't be overlooked at this point of time. As far as UX design is concerned or product design is concerned, people wanted all these changes to be happening right now. The focus is on how to make this design easy to use, secure for everybody. Now most of the UX designers are now focused on making things easier for all kind of users, right? And how like how many steps would we need to do a particular task, bring that down to minimum as possible, fewer steps to do, give better experience. This is what designers have been focusing on during this time as well, in order to help businesses overcome the tough situation. One example I can highlight is like some of us mentioned here, the travel industry and hotel industry perhaps are some of those industries which are hit really hard. The businesses are almost zero. So one of the portals, for example, they were into holiday packages, right? So once the market started coming up again, one of the things they did was basically go and communicate on the on their website, on the portal, of their adoption of the situation to the new market needs, which is like earlier people were booking holiday packages. Now they have to communicate in such a way that, hey, this packages which you are booking can be cancelled anytime. It's a big time, because earlier there's a big concern. Customer said, if I'm booking something, can I cancel it? Because people are not sure of themselves traveling, or things might change. The spike could go up or it could come down, or something else might come in, some lockdown might come in. So those are some new set of expectations customers have been going through in the last year or so.
That's really interesting. So I personally work in travel and hospitality domain. The company that I work with is associated with that, and I can understand the pain that we've gone through. And I can totally relate with the example that you've given. Cancellations just surged in during the weeks of the lockdown, and then many new features were added in to actually, instead of refunding money because cash flow issues. organizations and airlines tried to give them unlimited kind of a 1 year, 1.5 year kind of a, they can book anytime. Instead of this, they can book anytime later. So they get a voucher rather than a refund kind of a mode, right? So pretty interesting stuff on the examples that you gave, Suresh. Um, so now let's talk about the changes that have actually been driven, right? We briefly heard from Kapil about what kind of priorities were there. Now, maybe a question to Rebecca. Uh, on the business excellence side, what kind of changes did you actually drive, or the kind of activities? If you look at the business model canvas, there are certain activities that we do to ensure that the value proposition is actually delivered to the customer, right? On the activity side, what kind of activities or the changes were driven on the business excellence side?
So I'm going to expand a little bit on what Suresh spoke about, because in our, in our area of work, what we noticed is while we used to sell our product platforms and enter the market with the product platform, we started now seeing that we were leading our conversations with our digital experience consulting and that group, right? So that shifted the focus in what needed to be easy to get out faster, which meant the digital experience solutions that we were building, we started changing our focus to see how do we create usable components in those spaces so that newer clients that come in, we can quickly, convert what they need out of what is already existing. So from a business excellence standpoint, while initially a lot of the focus was just on creating a standard way of working, the focus changed to see how much can we reuse, how much can we create in terms of components for delivery, how do we ensure that we have really strong testing suites that available that we can then pick up and quickly customize to go from one customer to the other. This also meant that my team needed to be more technically aware. So we had to go through a lot of trainings to make sure that the team understands the technology teams that we are supporting and the technology platforms better. So a whole lot of training. Now, the good thing is we were saving 3 to 4 hours of traffic time. So everyone had those extra hours to, spend on getting into those conversations or getting into the training programs that were happening. Second thing that significantly helped me was before the town halls and the earnings calls would get attended by just a small slice of the team, because you anyway will get to hear about it from either your leader or somebody else that you meet within the organization. Now everyone's listening in, which meant everybody comes back with some perspective, and that sort of gives the level of insight that you get from the questions that the teams are asking you. It's very easy to quickly change your strategy or your focus and say, okay, this is what we're going to focus on differently. So from the teams, what I learned is we need to get our tooling up to speed. We need to create a system which allows for people to communicate and track their work, to deliver their work without having to keep on talking, without having to be sitting in meetings. There's also communication fatigue that has set in for everyone, because all of us are on calls and trying to connect with everybody else, right? So the more I can get done by using a tooling system makes it that much less busy for my guys. Especially on the operations side, a lot of our ops managers would get stressed because the clients would just pick up the phone and call the ops manager. That used to be a model of working. Interestingly, after being in this particular space for like 50 years, the company still has a lot of customers for whom we give that white glove treatment, saying, yeah, call this guy, he'll take care of all your problems. But we had to move away from that model. So we trained our guys on tools like ServiceNow, started putting those in place so that newer clients that we were onboarding into operations would get onboarded on a tool and on a tool platform. So, from the get-go, they're used to logging calls and logging the incidents. And the teams also have a better way of prioritizing what they need to get into, especially the service lines that support the level 1 and level 2 calls from customers. Those were the initial things that we really looked to change in the model of working.
Okay, so you talked about two key things, which is about getting customers used to a new approach to interact, new ways to interact with the organization. That means the support that is extended in a new way. How did customers actually take it?
It wasn't easy. Let me be frank. It wasn't easy. The first few interactions, the first few teams that we moved into that model, it was really hard because our teams were not prepared. Our teams were just used to interacting with the internal stakeholders. They weren't interacting with external stakeholders, or there's no escalation from an external stakeholder dissatisfaction flowing into my team, and now we are facing those. So it really took some time to get the team to shift their focus to say, if there is an external client who's getting onboarded on the platform, all hands on deck. You have to be ready to get in there and advise the team and go that extra mile to solve the problems for them and over communicate. So not just be available, but with each mistake that we made, we started re-looking at our onboarding decks, re-looking at our communications to see how do we strengthen that, so that the next client that comes on, we are fixing those issues.
That's great. Okay. My next question would be to Kishore. So Kishore, on the program management side, obviously there are many ideas that came in. Product probably has identified a few, business excellence identified a few, user experiences a few thoughts, but then everything needs to be done by the teams. And as a person managing large programs, what changes did you see in the way things were getting done?
Yeah, great question, Ras. And to throw more perspective, right? It's both ways, right? It's not only the management or the leadership that has to go through this. I would say education or awareness of collaborative tools, which they were doing it on face-to-face communications or travel or whatnot, right? So the initial hiccup, I would say, is around the collaborative tools that the team has to use upon, right? So people were using it. It's not that they don't know, not aware of it, but it's about the availability of issues like the bandwidth, right? Because of COVID, people travel back to their places, and there were many technological challenges when we are trying to get people onboarded, or when we are trying to bring them up to speed. What is that we need to plan around? And so basically the collaborative tools and of course the remote leadership posed a kind of challenge, especially, right, on how project managers or program managers or the senior leaders would ensure that the team is working or team is safe, and also at the same time delivering value to the business. And uh, an interesting thing I would like to bring up to the table is, right, so along with the increased focus from the delivery side of it, there was also key focus from business line leaders as well, right? Because initially they were not very enthusiastic about prioritizing their or putting money onto developing their digital platforms, have turned back and said that, oh, now this is our priority, right? We need to make ensure that our digital platform is up and running, and there is it, because it also indirectly impacted the supply chain as well, right? So the business supply chain. So data became really critical, and there were many data related programs which came up, which shifted up the priority ladder, and the projects are being addressed to kind of respond to the prioritization, right? And so remote collaboration, the remote leadership, and of course the stakeholder engagement is something which became a key. As Rebecca was mentioning, teams were not very vigorously engaging with stakeholders earlier. Although if they wanted to do, they used to travel to that place and have a face-to-face conversation. Now this became very virtual. So that did had an initial hiccup, but people are pretty smart enough. They started adopting it, and now they are fully embracing the change, or what is called the new reality of it.
Great. That's a good point that you talked about, Kishore, about face-to-face communication and actually going and meeting customers. Rahul, this question probably to you. As a startup, you get your connects and contacts through meeting them at various places, be it conferences, be it in-person meetings, trying to ascertain um, a potential engagement that you get involved in. How has life evolved for you and for the startups that you've been working with, where uh, the customer relationships and were really impacted as a result of not really meeting them face to face?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Raj. So maybe so okay. So I think first of all, I think there are two parts to this. One is the prospecting and lead generation, and the other is the product or the project engagement itself, right?
Mhm.
So I'll kind of maybe touch upon both of those aspects a little bit. See, from about 2009 till 2019, I have actually worked in organizations with geographically distributed teams working across, Europe, Asia Pac, and the US. So I was actually very comfortable with these remote collaboration tools. I mean, whether it be whiteboarding, even to do brainstorming across it. So I was personally quite comfortable with that. And when I started my consulting engagements, I'd set it up, right up front. I'd set it up in a way that the commitment was that I would do everything remotely, and I would be in office maybe once in 2 weeks or so for any really critical meetings. Otherwise I would generally try and, because that enabled me to do two things. One is it allowed me to work on multiple clients at the same time, because if you're working on two clients, and if you're always at a customer site, you can't work on the, it's not easy to work on another client's project when you're sitting in in one client's
Absolutely.
office, right? So that way, I sort of set it up in a way that I could do this remotely. That is one aspect. The other is I wanted to avoid commute, because I didn't want to spend 3-4 hours traveling a day, right? So I avoided that. So that was one part of it. And the prospecting side of things, I think, took a big hit, because you could no longer meet people over a coffee or a beer and generally chat and figure out what's going on. Is there a potential fit? You know to make serendipity, right? Because there's no more of that, right? You talk and something comes up and that kind of leads to something else. I mean, in fact, the first two engagements that I got were all serendipity. People just called and we just chatted. I was meeting somebody over a drink and said, hey, we need a product manager. Oh, maybe I can help. Okay, let's get started. So those sort of conversations were just not happening as easily. So that's sort of when I went. So there's this good friend of mine, Vishal. We were colleagues back in Sabre back in the day. In 2010 time period, we were colleagues, and then he moved on to Expedia, and we've been friends all along. So during this time, and we'd been talking about getting together and starting something on our own, right? And that's when so in April is sort of we kind of, okay, let's do this. We got together and we decided, okay, we're going to start something in the consulting space. But we're not very sure, and we had two ideas that we were kind of playing with. I mean, we're not sure which one to kind of pursue. So one of the ideas was that we would help first time entrepreneurs who are currently in a job and who are kind of contemplating starting up something. We'll help them get started on their journey, right? And to validate that idea, we actually spoke to probably not less than 15 people in a period of about a month and a half. In that April to May time period, we talked to about 15 people spread across India, US, and Europe to try and see what has been their experience when they tried some of these experiments, when they wanted to try and start off, and what are some of the challenges that they faced, and then how we could potentially help them, right? But after those 15 interviews, we decided, okay, maybe that's not the space that we want to focus on. And we decided to kind of go back to product management, focus on product management, for two reasons. One is our expertise was in that area, uh, and two was that I had already done that for about a year or so, and we knew there was an opportunity there. We just didn't know how big that opportunity was. So we decided to kind of focus on that. Sometime in early June, we decided, okay, we're going to do via product. That's the thing that we want to focus on, right? And in fact, I think Kapil and we had actually interviewed Kapil a couple of weeks back, or maybe a month and a half back, to understand what are some of the pain points that startups face, the product leaders in startups face, so that we can actually fine tune our offering, right? So,
Right.
and as part of this, we also sort of, I mean, we got our first client virtually, and we did and it was a assessment of their product organization, and this was spread across India and US, and we kind of did all of that virtually, right? And so what that means is everything can be done virtually. It's just that you need to figure out how to do that. And right now I'm actually taking a course on Udemy on how to do lead generation through LinkedIn, something that I'd never done before. But let's try and do that. I mean, but it forces you to kind of evolve and adapt. I think that's the thing.
Great. So I'll look at some audience questions right now. I noticed that there is one question that has come out about um, from Mahadevan, which is who's asking about interesting business model experiments. So any experiment. So let me make it a little bit more specific. So maybe to you, Suresh, any user experience experiments that were conducted? Anything that you can share?
Nothing that comes to my mind what I have done in my recent employments. But for user experience per se, we have been always, luckily for us, we've been always into this remote mode where most of our customers were, online because they were
Mhm.
in US or some other part of the world, and getting to them was, only way was through, doing virtual interviewing or virtual user tests with them. However, what has changed is basically, how they react to situations. Like, for example, I can tell you, we were conducting a whole lot of design workshops that were, conducted for the various clients. And what is to happen is clients is to fly in from different parts of the world. We have a good 3-day, 4-day design working sessions, and then we take the takeaways. That suddenly stopped, right? And then we had plans on the roadmap to help a couple of clients where we would have them, sort out problems through design thinking, at least find some way to do things. And that had to be suddenly now done on a virtual platform. We use Mural and things like that. Um, Having said that, it's very challenging, and that's what we realized. We had a very strong working model of how do we conduct design thinking sessions. How do we manage it, when we take breaks, what is the takeaway of the day. We have whiteboards and sticky pads all around the room. Now suddenly all of that has gone, and then we have to kind of do it online. So all our material that we have built, we had to kind of realign or redesign it for the virtual world. What that means is your pre-planning sessions, your breakout sessions. Yeah, and only one good thing in that was you could have a large audience now. Instead of, if you have a room of 15 people, you could have a room of 20 people. But then that itself is a problem because you cannot sustain the interest of people for a very long time. And having this breakout session becomes a really, really tough task. And then there are this, environmental issues as well. Like, for example, when we were going through the COVID time, when we prepared this entire material to be done online, we were experimenting with it. Then we realized the technological challenges which we face on a virtual platform anyways, somebody not getting an access, somebody not able to log into the mural, somebody not able to see the pages, they don't know how to use the tool. So there is learning, training, all that happening simultaneously. But more importantly, there were environmental challenges as well. Like, for example, we were doing, one of the clients was from Kolkata, and there was a cyclone there, and the entire electricity had gone out, and that person was going from his mobile trying to address. And what we realized is we had to be very empathetic with the people we are dealing with, because they did not necessarily tell us, hey, I don't have electricity. But it was so important that we wanted everybody's time, and that was the only time we could figure out, because we can't take people for granted. Since they're working from home, they're available. And so these are the changes that I have seen. But primarily for UX design per se, we've always been in this virtual world to talk to people, interview them. We have two screens where people, we can observe their reactions, and we can see the screen, what they're doing, those sort of things. Or we were doing interviews like that. So there's no major change. But change is this, taking the models that we were doing regularly on a physical world, how do you adapt to the virtual world and still get the same sort of a quality, and what do you say, the outcomes are similar to what you would get in a real interaction. So that's a change I've seen in my experience so far.
Okay, that's interesting. You're saying uh, the gist of what you said is trying to replicate outcomes in a virtual world, what we actually get in a physical, in-person meetings or world. That's really interesting. Uh,
Raj, I can quickly add about one of the
mhm,
experimentations and innovations we did around business models specifically. So on one side, we were seeing our customers getting impacted by this situation. Many of their employees were getting furloughed, and also there was some amount of layoffs also happening for our customers. On the other hand, business continuity was still required during this remote environment. So our product was very much necessary to help them in ensuring business continuity. So knowing these two facts, we came up with an offering called Digital Adoption Assistant, in which essentially was we will augment our own services to help them continue the usage of that software. So people among our customers who were helping in adopting that software, we augmented with our own services. So this was one experiment we did, and we saw a decent amount of success in last 1 quarter.
So what kind of data were you looking at, Kapil, to judge whether something is a success, or were there any metrics that you were trying to capture or look at?
So it is simple as customers buying our offering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying and actually paying, right?
Yeah.
Seeing revenue come in. Great.
Yep.
Great. So again, there are two sides to any part, right? Obviously, there is ideas that get generated around value, what potentially can be valuable. There are customer segments which potentially will like that value, but then it also has to be delivered, and there are people involved in trying to deliver value, which is our team members. We heard about how laptops people kind of figured out and use their personal agility to adapt. But then what has changed for them? Kishore and Rebecca, you folks are more in touch with the folks on the ground who are actually delivering valuable software or solutions or products. How has life changed for them?
So I have a very interesting observation. While we work as a single entity, or we have a mixed group of people when we deliver solutions, we have teams that are half based in the US, half in India, and our leadership is also kind of enmeshed that way. I might have someone in India who has a team sitting in the US and vice versa. Suddenly what changed for us is information became democratic. Everyone sitting in these calls, right? So there's no siloed meeting happening in some office space somewhere in Chicago or somewhere in Bangalore, where only a small group of people know what's going on or what the idea or thought process is. So that really accelerated a lot of our interworking delivery models that we were focused on. A lot of times what used to happen before is we'll run a pilot in one location, see how things go, and then try and bring the others on board to adopt a way of working. That changed. Now we realize that, people, the resilience of people and the way in which people adapt to these new situations, I've seen so many different ways in which people have changed their way of working. It's amazing. I think I've learned more than I've been able to give people, just by seeing the ways in which they started communicating differently, started co-working differently, right? So that meant that our a lot of these initiatives got fast-tracked, because now I wasn't going to be working with one small group somewhere in one geography and trying to push it to the other geography. They just came together in the same meeting, because anyway we're all remote. Makes no difference whether where you're placed. We do have a challenge though. And I'm probably going to talk to Rahul to understand later how he does all this whiteboarding, because I'm still not very comfortable with having to do that, not being face to face with people. I really have to have a board on which I like to scribble and have someone else look at it, look at their expressions and figure out if they're buying my idea or not, or trying to understand how they think, right? That really has been a challenge to move things. So while more people are getting into the initiative, the models are moving a little slower, because you have to then build consensus by a lot of communication and back and forth to get to an agreement. One other thing that we did is I restructured my teams, because the teams were just getting in there as consultants mostly. Like, we're an internal group of consultants, so you get into any project that comes along and you can run the show. But now there's more of a need to have a deeper connect with your sponsor. So I structured my team in a way that, one or two people align to each of our key sponsors, which allows them to then build a relationship there. That relationship is what will push your work faster or your initiatives faster, more than the strength of the outcomes you're promising to achieve. Because still people aren't seeing you now. So the trust factor that used to be there before and just being able to work together in a session and get things out fast is not there anymore. So you have to actually show them some mini outcome before they'll buy your idea. And so aligning people and building those, relationships within the team and having each one handle a certain focused business unit really helped us to change the way things are moving. So that was how we sort of countered our challenges.
Okay. Kishore,
Yeah.
anything that you would not like to add?
Yeah. So I would like to add there. So great point as Rabika mentioned, right? And I was also mentioning it earlier in the conversation. So collaboration is something which clearly came out as the need of the app. And along with collaboration, the other key thing which came up when we are working with remote teams or keep them motivated and up to speed is how you encourage teams to be more, I would say, decentralized, as Rebecca was saying, right? There were many restructures which have happened, although not formally, maybe informally, that, okay, these guys will act as, take up these roles when it comes to a product or a project delivery. Uh, and the other key thing, at least what we experimented or what I initiated within my teams is to recognize each other for the effort they are doing, right? All the world is in chaos. There is too much of confusion. There is too much uncertainty around it. And it's very important that at least I felt that to keep the people's motivation level higher. So we started something called recognizing people right from as now, because there are no physical barriers when it came to virtual world. We have even asked our VPs and GMs also send a congratulatory message even to a developer, right, who has done pretty good job in a week or something. So usually we have this quarterly awards or something which roll up, but the thing which bring in transparency is recognizing each and every one of the people, even for some for a quick win or a small win they have done during this phase of time. So motivation factor, upping the levels of motivation is something which has drastically changed. And of course, the new generation is pretty smart. They know how to adapt to the new tools and technology rather than I or the older generation per se. But the collaborative tools, along with the fundamental principle of understanding the business need rather than being instructed to do that, okay, this is the piece of code you have to write, that's your job, don't think about anything else. So what we try to bring is give them the most possible bigger picture for their perspective and help them understand how they are actually adding value to the business, right? So that kind of helped them to understand that they are getting more involved into the business rather than they're just doing a day job from 9 to 5 kind of thing. So that really lightened up the spirits and enabled our teams to deliver more, or rather up to the expectations in these tough times.
Great. So I'll just take one related question coming in, which is about from the audience. RC Goyal has asked, hiring via platforms like LinkedIn enhanced and easy due to virtual interviews and uh, finalizing to start with an assignment in WFH mode. Um, Anything that you want to comment, Suresh? Maybe this is related to uh, employee experience. How what they experience while joining an organization or leaving an organization or working with an organization, right? So anything that you've been involved in as a trying to improve that experience?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, see, what has changed, especially I can talk about product designers or designers specifically, because hiring for UX design is a completely different way of how you choose people, how do you approach them, because a lot of depends on their portfolio per se and how much they know about design per se, and how what is the approach when they're solving issues or problems. Earlier it was easier. We call them into the room, we do some whiteboarding, use some problem, try to go deeper into the problem, see what thought process they have in, how do they approach a particular problem, how do you break the stories, and so on. So it was easier. Then you review their portfolio, which is they have to share, and then we give some assignment to do at home and probably do it in the office sometimes. Having gone that process being gone online, what has happened is you can review that portfolio, no problems. You can talk to them virtually, no problem. But whiteboarding and probing on certain design problems becomes a little challenging factor there. And that's where the interviewers have to take a different route as to how we are going to manage it. So basically what we do is we break that up into a couple of people asking different kind of probing questions, and go take one simple problem which they can solve. Also given design thinking or design problem which they can do at home. Now the problem with that is during this period specifically, what I've realized is everybody was so busy trying to align, and there was a lot of pressure on designers as well to react to the market needs, fix what is required immediately. So they were not in the position to do these design assignments. It was very hard for them, so many of them refused, saying that we really don't have the time. But primarily, some of them whom we hired and kind of got on board was practically looking at how they react to our questions, what thought process they have, what work they have done in the past. So yes, platforms like LinkedIn helped a lot, because we can go then see their profile. There are other platforms like Chlorofloat or Behance, where they put their websites up. We go, research their work. There is some feedback that is there, and then of course we have our own network of people through which I can also check if a particular person is working in a company. I probably know a designer there or somebody there whom I can check with, right? So just to understand how it is. Not so much on the designing the assignment that has been given. Some people accept it, but I do realize this is very tough, because when a design assignment is given, it usually takes about good 20 hours to finish it, and if you don't get that time, you will not be doing justice to it, and that creates a bad impression on the people who are hiring. So yes, the online platform has been working fine. We have hired people, we have sent laptops to their location, and we have had when they were onboarding, we had some creative ways of onboarding them, having a virtual chai session with them and things like that. So but this is a new world we live in, so we had to adopt. There was a line of requirements that were there. We had to kind of identify, sort out people. And another thing, I don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing that has happened during pandemic. A lot of people has been followed, the designers. So right, we actually got an opportunity to give them to come over and talk to us and see what whether they would be interested in joining us. So that was also a good thing in some sense, a good bad in some sense, because very good designers were out there, but they were not getting jobs. So that has been my experience.
Great. So we are in the last 5 minutes now, and there's one last question that I would like to take up from the audience, and then we will try to conclude. So there's one question that has come in from, again, RC Goel, who says, due to remote communication and no travel expenses, it should have reduced cost and hence enhanced profitability. Anybody would like to comment on that before we get into trying to conclude?
I would stand up. I mean, it's quite an optimistic way of saying it. I would say that, right? So, yes, for sure, travel cost has come down, but relatively there are multiple other costs which came into the books of the organizations, right? It's not only especially the infrastructure cost, and as we have spoken about, the collaborative tools, and of course, getting people onboarded with those tools, and ensuring that everything handled remotely versus physically. So although travel costs have come down, I guess those are more or less equated by the other infrastructural cost. The cost of technology is something which actually negated the positive rate which came down. And of course, the other key thing is the consumer demand itself, right? So the demand for the goods or the product itself has come down. So I would say this is not very significant enough to for us to benchmark that, okay, all the organizations are doing well because they have cut down on travel cost.
Agree. Yes, I totally agree with that. So I think last 3 minutes. So quickly, anything that I would like to go round robin on this, and I would like to ask each one of you to give one takeaway that you would want to share with somebody who is performing a similar role as you're currently performing, or who's working in a group similar to what you're performing, be it product management, user experience, program management, business excellence. What is it that you would like to share with them? One takeaway. I'll go first with Rebecca.
Thank you, Raj. It's a huge lesson that I've learned to compartmentalize my life in this time because boundaries have blurred like never before. So I would say choose your stakeholders wisely, choose your projects wisely, uh, do lesser engagements, but do them with high focus so that you can bring better results. A lot of what I do requires a lot of communication and collaboration across the organization. So I have said no to many of these ad hoc consulting requests and performance interventions from many stakeholders, knowing that we won't be able to do justice to all of them. Pick the most important ones, listen very carefully to the business strategy of the organization, what the growth plan is like, and what the company itself intends to do before you decide what you want to choose and drive for. So if you're enabling something for the for the business that is critical to them, then it makes sense. If you're not really contributing to that critical path, then keep it aside for now. That's something you can deal with at a different time. And people are smart enough to solve their own problems. You don't have to solve all of them.
Perfect. So limiting work in progress is a key takeaway. Great. Suresh, any takeaway that you would like to share? You're mute.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, I was on mute. Yes, certainly. I will see one takeaway that I would definitely say, and we it was kind of based upon touching that point today is, this is, we don't know how long this thing is going to last, right? But one thing that we need to remember is users behaviors and expectations changes, and it all changes all the time. What was awesome yesterday is hygiene today, and they're expecting something else better than that tomorrow. Having said that, one other thing is, companies need to be resilient and flexible to survive in this volatile, world. But that starts with addressing the user points while uh, being empathetic to them, and and to their needs in this phase, right? And that needs good research. And I think Kapil talked about R&D and how they are addressing it every 4 weeks, every month on month, try to change, look at what's coming, learn from it and adapt. Rebecca talked about communication. How quickly can you communicate and say, how are we doing to help you to come out or go through this phase? So there are challenges and there are also opportunities in this phase. So there's opportunity to observe and do research, right? And for many products and services, users needs are shifting rapidly. Lots of teams have decided to hold off on doing previously planned research and projects. But I think that is not a way to do. User research is a form of risk reduction for your business, right? And you need to put more focus on it right now. And there are areas where you can observe the user behavior of the user, and depending who is the user is, the behavior and preference changes maybe differ to different segments as well. But when assessing the impact of COVID on your users and the business, consider a couple of things that are behavioral shifts or psychological shifts, changes in your user groups, how they are migrating, what are the regional effects, and what are the temporary effects that are having, what are the long-term effects that are having. So I would like to say that observe the users in this new pair of glasses. It is time to invest in more research and not less. This will become like your campus, right? Of where things are, where you're headed, and how you need to basically adapt to new behaviors and patterns of your users. So focus more on learning, observability, and experiment.
So learning about the users, great. We're almost out of time already, but uh, if you can very briefly talk about your takeaways, Kishore, then Rahul, then Kapil.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. So yeah, we are out of time, but quickly wanted to add that, right? This is a tough time, unprecedented. Nobody's prepared for it, but I'm sure that at least for me, the key takeaway was uh, we need to be precise on what we wanted to achieve, right? It's not that you can get everything out of this world, and you can. So for people out there who are actually planning out to get onto many other courses and etc., try to ensure what is the key thing which you want to do, and try to be as agile as nimble as possible. It applies both to startup world and corporates, right? So now you see there are many corporates also encouraging entrepreneurial skills within their organization, right? They're trying to put in more product managers or more productized organizations rather than project
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah.
So that's the
So
one key thing.
priority. So your takeaway is priority. Prioritize absolutely what is needed, right? Rahul, what about you?
I think my biggest learning, from a sheer business perspective, is that I think cash is king, right? I think
Cash is
if you have a business that is generating cash, and you have cash reserves, that helps you tide through these times much better. So I think the focus has to be on building cash reserves as a business. And just to give you a quick example, so the client that I was, we did the engagement with as VR product, we gave a bunch of recommendations, and one of the things was to hire a key role, right, that was missing in the organization. And when I saw the salary that they were willing to offer, I mean, my jaws dropped literally, because that's the kind of cash reserves they had, right? And I think that helps you invest for the future. So I think building those cash reserves is critical from a business perspective.
Yeah, cash reserves for probably a startup. I'm hoping large corporates already have reasonable cash reserves to survive, right? Kapil?
Yeah, very quickly, sustainability, customer focus, agility to adapt.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel. Thanks to the audience for listening in. So I just conclude this session with what I would like to add is, hopefully, we hope that we've been able to explain to our audience different aspects of what business models are, or what business model includes, the 9 key elements, get insights from various groups within an organization as to how they actually, what they observed, how they went about trying to evolve, and overall, by doing these things, evolve one or more of the 9 aspects of a business model canvas. So that's what we wanted to leave the audience with. I thank the audience for being nice, patient, hearing us out. Rohit, over to you.
I thank Rajshekar for being a great moderator. We thank Kishore, Rahul, Kapil, Rebecca, and Suresh.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Raj. Everybody,
Good
have a
rest of
good
your day.
Sunday.
Bye.